USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
My name is Amy Forsythe, and I was born and raised in Santa Rosa, California, which is just north of San Francisco. My grandparents served in World War II, so my grandfather was a Marine officer and my grandmother was an Army nurse, and that was on my dad's side. And then on my mom's side, my grandfather was in the Navy. My grandfather, Hart, who served as a Marine in Guam, met my grandmother, who was working as an Army nurse on the island of Saipan in Guam during the island hopping campaigns. And when the war was over, they came home, linked back up, got married, and moved to Northern California. I decided to join the Marine Corps at the old age of 22. I had put it on the back burner for a few years after I graduated high school, but once I really discovered that that was exactly what I needed to be doing, I joined at 22 as a combat correspondent. So I went to my basic training as a Marine at Parris Island, South Carolina. It's where they were training. All women were trained together by women drill instructors. From there, I went to the Defense Information School, and at the time it was at Fort Benjamin Harrison, but this schoolhouse is what we refer to it, is where they trained all the military journalists, broadcasters, photographers, artists, graphic designers, and I gained valuable skills such as storytelling, writing, video, how to be a DJ, a radio announcer. So I learned a variety of skills at that schoolhouse. It really rivals any journalism school. I went to my first duty station at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and I worked at the radio and television station there. And during my tour there, we had thousands, tens of thousands of Haitians and Cubans trying to come to America, where they were picked up at sea and brought to the base. And so within a couple months of my arrival, my deployment there turned into a full-scale joint operation where we had to mitigate the risks for families living there and tell the stories about what people were doing at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and how we were now had this huge influx of 60,000 people on a base that was designed for 4,000. So it was really my first experience working in a real-world humanitarian crisis and being really one of just a hand-select few of military journalists on the ground being able to tell that story. I had come home from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I was assigned at Camp Pendleton near San Diego, California, where I was working at the base newspaper, the base TV station. I was working community relations. I was working with our local media. So a myriad of different jobs working under the public affairs umbrella. And at that point, I'd already served 8 years, 2 4-year enlistments, and I decided to leave active duty and go back to college. I stayed in the reserves because I still loved the Marine Corps. I was still working my way through school, using my GI Bill, doing my reserve drill weekends. And then 9/11 happened, and then everything changed. I got mobilized right away after 9/11 to go to my first deployment to Afghanistan.
Most of my time in Afghanistan was spent with Army Civil Affairs engineers preparing and delivering school supplies and sporting equipment.
Well, what some of the other soldiers and I have done is put together all the goodies that have been sent by our families and friends, like pens and pencils and candy and paper and crayons. All the things that you've sent to us, we put together in Ziploc bags to give to the kids you see here.
I felt very fortunate that I got selected to go on this very important mission. I was there attached to a civil affairs unit, so what we were doing is rebuilding schools and rebuilding hospitals and delivering books and humanitarian aid.
Well, I'm inside one of the tent classrooms here, and they're letting me use their calligraphy pen here, and it's their method of practicing their handwriting. And I'm surrounded by dozens and dozens of beautiful, beautiful girls here. And I'm practicing my name. Thanks, girls. Tasha Kerr.
It was just this emotional roller coaster getting mobilized, coming home, finishing school, going back overseas. My first deployment to Afghanistan in 2003, and then a follow-on deployment. The war in Iraq had really ramped up and was still continuing in 2006. Those series of deployments definitely had a ripple effect on my personal life and my professional life. Of course, my family is, very supportive through the years, but missing out on so many important events. College graduations, my sister getting married, and just some really key life events that you miss out on. Through the years, 3 tours to Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq, back to back to back. Sometimes blurring the lines of where am I, where was this, was that in Iraq or Afghanistan? I can't really remember. Without pictures and video to remind me of where I was or what I was doing, I might not exactly remember. But the feeling that we have now left Afghanistan is a big relief, but certainly an emotional time watching what happened in August 2021 and being involved in that has really, without having the closure that is needed and watching it on TV, the way it went down was just really awful for me, and I know for a lot of other people as well.
We're only halfway through our patrol right now, and the Iraqi soldiers have set up a vehicle checkpoint.
Through the years, my mission and assignments would change, so I went my first time as a Marine Combat Correspondent attached to an Army Civil Affairs unit, and that was in 2003. I went to Iraq in 2006, and then I returned to Iraq in 2008 as a Marine working in Anbar province in places like Fallujah, Ramadi, Haditha. I was out with the troops, taking photos, taking video, telling their story, sharing my footage with the world, basically, sending it up on satellites, pushing it out to the media outlets. So a lot of the footage that you see on TV, historical footage and file footage, was taken by me or other people like me from Iraq. And so during those really dark days in 2006, especially, where the casualty rate was so high that it was just so difficult to push through every day, a year-long tour, and just seeing so many young people injured, severely killed. It was very difficult. That year was the most difficult year. And then I went back to Afghanistan. Fast forward to 2013, I was assigned to the northern part of the country under a NATO mission. So it was the German-led NATO command in Mazar-e-Sharif, where I was the only American in our public affairs office. So that experience working in an international environment in a foreign country as one of just a handful of Americans who spoke fluent English, that was a unique experience, and I learned a lot about how NATO works and understanding the dynamics between our NATO partners, and where my role fit in as more of a coach and a mentor and a guide. My third tour in 2018, working under a Special Operations Command, added another layer of complexity working with the Army Rangers and Army Special Forces. So I was assigned to a Special Operations Task Force as a public affairs officer. So by this time I had switched from the Marine Corps to now being in a Navy role as a Navy officer, and they sent me to a mission at the Special Operations Task Force in Bagram Air Base. And so I was there working with top-tier media, a Wall Street Journal, ABC News, Newsweek, sharing with them our story of our Special Forces, our Green Berets. And so it was my job to get the media out to these sites and do embeds and deliver on those promises that we want to show you what we're actually doing and showcase those events and partnerships that we've built. I'll be honest with you, I never thought in a million years that I, Amy Forsythe, would write a book. I noticed that there had been some new tributes and memorials for those lost at Camp Pendleton during wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I started taking photos, and I was sharing with Gold Star families and my fellow Marines that no longer live in the area. And I thought, what better way to capture this and share with people that don't know or who can't come back and see it than put it in a book. And What I learned in my research through the book is that more Marines and sailors from Camp Pendleton were killed in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan than any other one base or station in America. And so that's a heavy burden. And so the book, Heroes Live Here, just came to me through my desire to tell the story as really a passion project. I'll share with you a story about a woman that I served with in Iraq in 2006. Her name was Megan McClung, and she was a Marine major. She was on our team. She was a media officer. During our 2006 deployment, sadly, she was killed by an IED along with 2 other soldiers. She was escorting Oliver North and the Fox News crew along with a Newsweek journalism team. You know, when people heard about her death back at camp, it took them back. It was really just one of the hardest hitting tragedies that we had during that deployment. She was the first female Marine officer to be killed in Iraq. And so that got people's attention because they realized that if women are in a combat zone, they are just at risk as anybody else. And it is a great honor to be able to represent her and carry on and tell people about that, because what we hear a lot about is men who did something heroic and they got an award, and you never hear about these unsung heroes who were also at risk, who were women who were just doing their job but took tremendous risks. And her name was Megan McClung, and she lives on, and we try to share that legacy and just share that there were women who risked everything and who often don't get any recognition for it. Welcome to the Camp Fallujah 2-Minute Report. I'm Staff Sergeant Amy Forsythe. Theater Commander General George Casey welcomed the new Multinational Forces West Commander to the region in a recent ceremony. Corporal Lynn Murillo was there. When we were in Fallujah, Iraq, February 2006, Sergeant Adam Can was killed just prior to our arrival, and he was a canine handler, military working dog handler, and they had painted a T-wall with his image on it, and that T-wall is like a blast wall, and it's made of concrete, and it's very large and very heavy, but that was at the canine compound on Camp Fallujah that I walked by every day. When I came back to Camp Pendleton in 2020, I looked as I was exiting the base at the canine compound, and I realized that they had brought back that T-wall from Camp Fallujah and placed it at Camp Pendleton. And when I saw that, I was so overtaken by emotion. I was so thrilled that they would preserve that T-wall and not leave it at Camp Fallujah, but they boarded it on a plane somehow and got it home and felt it important enough to bring back that very T-wall and place it at the canine compound. The Wall of Honor in the book is a series of photos of Marines that I knew personally, that I had served with personally, that were all killed in action. Megan McClung is on there, Doug Zembiak, Travis Mannion. Travis wrote home to his parents saying, "I know I have to serve, but if not me, then who?" And so he took great pride in being able to serve and lost his life. And so those pictures and names, just a way to remember them in a special way. What I'm most proud of is now watching that those Marines that were junior to me or that worked for me or that I supervised in our deployments and back in garrison somewhere, that watching them go on to be leaders. So the saying goes, you're not a leader until you make other leaders. And so when I get to see them go on and become leaders and lead other people, and while I might have been hard on them at the time to perform to a standard or an expectation, and they hated me for it at the time, but they've gone on to great success and become the leaders that they were meant to be. And I feel like I had a small hand in that. And so I feel like that connection that I had with them at the time is my greatest accomplishment, that if I could make other leaders into being great leaders, that's my legacy.